to the data channel. And so today we will be discussing about data backup versus archiving. So there might be certain slight confusion between these two terminologies in data engineering or data space. So it's both related to data. So how are you? It's just a process and the purpose. What defines whether we want to go for a backing up the data or archiving the data, right? So the terminologies might sound little similar, but as I said, the purpose and like why exactly we are doing it and what exactly the process is. So that exactly differentiates between data backup and archiving. So today we will clearly distinguish the certain parameters between uh, that can be considered. So to kind of differentiate between data backup and archiving. So before proceeding, if you are new to this channel, we would recommend you to please subscribe and also press bell button for instant notifications. So let's get started. First of all, what is data backup? By definition, backing up the data means simply copying of data that is created to restore the original data in case of data loss, corruption, or system failure. So this is very clear, right? So as you can see here, we are clearly mentioning it is in what scenarios basically, right? In case of data loss, data corruption, and system failures. See, data is important, so no doubt about it, and loss of any data can lead to financial crisis, and it might lead to a lot of uh, loss to the company or the organization that is owning this data, right? And so in case of such data loss, and when we say data loss, it can happen because of accidentally deleting the data and data getting corrupted because of some hardware issues, software issues, or might be the system or tool or software that is being used to kind of store the data itself has some issue, right? So during that cases, so what happens is that the data might be completely lost, right? So during that case, so we want to keep a copy of a data, exact copy of a data it's just like to keep a backup of the data in case like into multiple locations basically and are updated frequently. So how do we take the backup and like what is the process of taking backup? And so we are not going into that details, but theoretically what we are saying is backups are typically stored in multiple locations. So if you take example of clouds like Azure, AWS, right? So they actually have this feature inbuilt. When I say inbuilt, if you're using data lake, Azure data lake, so the data automatically gets like distributed or kind of a backed up or mirrored into different locations. So in case of emergency, so the data can be restored. So that's called a data backup, right? In the layman terms, if you have a document, so you want to keep a document of a document which is stored in a pen drive to kind of a cloud storage, right? Because the pen drive can be lost, or the pen drive can get corrupted, or the hard disk can get corrupted. So you want to store a copy in a cloud. So that's called a data backup simply, right? And so other thing is like need to keep in mind is update frequently, because you store a data, but you need to update the data also, right? So you have an employee catalog which stores all the information of all the employees, and so you need to update that frequently also, otherwise the data would become stale, right? So that's also important. So this is a definition of data backup. So coming to the archival. So archival also is nothing but is a long-term storage of the data. This is not frequently accessed, which is very important. So this is we need to highlight this. So unlike backing up the data, the purpose of data archival is not to access it frequently, but needs to preserve it for future reference, compliance, or history purpose. Okay. So this archive data is usually stored in a cost-effective storage solution that will come later. But the keywords that we see here is for the long-term storage. So long-term means like maybe 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the line. So you have memories of the photos that you have taken, right? So you are not using that photos or like videos that you have taken more frequently, right? However, you want to store them as a memory, and that is, we call it as a historical purpose, right? So you are archiving your pics, okay? Or it might be a case where you have certain songs or movies, you want to keep them, preserve them for a long term, so you just archive them for historical purpose, right? But so when it comes to industry standards, it is not just for historical purpose, but it is for future reference and compliance purpose, right? Because what happens is, so future reference, it can be used for, in case of anyone wants to audit the data, or anyone wants to see the reports as on particular date, right? So in that case, you want to have the reference of the older version of the data, right? So that that can be, some insights can be derived out of it, okay? So in that case, like, you might need the data, right? So that's the reason you have a future reference. But very, very important point here is the compliance. This is very key important thing when you're talking about data archival. Because archival, the main reason of archiving the data is compliance. So there are different industry regulations, regulatory compliance like HIPAA, GDPR, SEC, SOX, right? So these are different compliance related to different industries and different geographical locations or countries. So that any organization needs to comply with or follow, right? So if there are some regulations where if the data is about certain drug in the pharma industry, so that data has to be stored for say 20 years, 30 years, and each country has their own regulatory compliances to kind of store the data and secure the data. Like that is what we are kind of talking about. Data archival and compliance is very important when it comes to data archival, right? And archived data is usually stored in the cost-effective storage solution. Yeah, so the reason is because of the data volume, and also the tenure of the data that you are storing, right? Because it is not just you're taking a backup and restoring it in a months or something, right? You want to keep the data continuously in a huge volume of data for long term of time, right? So in that case, you need to have that cost effectiveness, because you're talking about TBs of data or GBs of data, so which is generating every month or every week. So you have to store them in the cost effective storage solutions. Otherwise, there will be high cost implications, right? So there are certain tools and technologies that offers data archival in a cost effective storage solutions, right? Now let's move to the purpose. So, so this is what derives or drives basically where exactly you want to go between backup and archive. So you need to understand this. The primary goal of archiving is to restore the lost or corrupted data quickly. Okay, so you might be doing some data migrations project where you want to like you don't want to accidentally delete or kind of accidentally corrupt the data. So in that case, what you generally do is you keep a copy of that particular database or the data lake, so that during the process of data migration, so you don't necessarily lose the data, right? And that is what we are talking about, where it is a disaster recovery and accidental deletions or any kind of cybersecurity attacks to prevent that from all these kind of scenarios. So we want to go for backup, right? And disaster recovery is a system where backups are necessary. So when you're talking about disaster recovery, we are talking about backups, right? Because without second copy of a data or third copy of a data, you cannot have a disaster recovery mechanism. Okay. So next thing is the frequency of access. That is, it is very frequent. It is high frequently used. Okay. The reason is like you kind of can have a backup of a data every day or every every hour for that matter, or every week, every month. So if it goes like say beyond month, or like say like every quarter or every year, so then essentially you are actually moving it towards archive. But if you're talking about like weeks or days, so definitely you are in the concept of, you need to use the concept of backup, because the accessing the data is very high. Okay, if the requirement is not to kind of frequently access the data, and you are actually in frequently using the data, so then you have to go for the archival of the data. And so as I said, this archiving comes into picture where you have to often required by the regulatory industry regulations, HIPAA, GDPR, SEC, and SOX controls. And here the data you need to retain the data for long-term reference and for the compliance. Okay, and unless like here it is for the in case of disaster recovery and accidental deletions. Okay, so if you understand the purpose, I think like the most of the confusions between backup and archive will be sorted. So moving on to the storage and retention. So if you see the difference in terms of storage type, so definitely storage type is high speed, high availability storage you need here, because so you're talking about the data need to be accessed very frequently, right? So then that's why you need a high speed and high availability. And so it might be in cloud or on premise, or both the combinations, like hybrid. And retention period is usually short terms, as as I was mentioning in the previous slide. It might be in the days of months. And data modification is dynamic. That means it's very frequent. Okay, because you're talking about every day or every week, or every hour for that matter, right? So the data can be keep on changing, and you need to sync the data to the backup copy that you are having, actual data with the backup copy that you are having, right? Because the reason is talking about disaster recovery, right? In case of disaster recovery, you want to have the nearest possible copy of the data available, right? If you want to have the nearest copy of the data available, so then you need to have the dynamic like data modification, which is like frequently getting updated, and you want to store the copy or sync the copy to the backup as frequently as possible, right? So when it comes to the archiving, so archiving the storage type, it's low cost, high capacity storage. So that means we are talking about cold storage here. Okay, so it might be cold storage, tape, optical media, or cloud archives also. Okay, so if you take cloud archives, so there are certain solutions that cloud vendors like AWS, Azure provides as a to archive the data. Okay, which they call it as a cold storage, which is of a low cost, but it takes time to retrieve the data when you are storing them. So that's why it is that trade-off between uh, the cost that you incur in the long term, and also the data accessibility. So you lose the data accessibility, or the accessibility of the data will be very low when you are talking about the cold storage, but it is cost effective, right? And what is the retention period? It is long-term retention period, years to decades, because of the compliance, based on the compliance regulations. And data modification is very rare, static, and rarely modified once archived. Yeah, we cannot say it will not be modified. It might be slightly modified, but in the real world scenario, we're talking like every month data you're archiving, right? So essentially, you don't want to modify the data after it is archived, okay? Because that doesn't serve any purpose, basically. Yeah. And what are the cost considerations? So when you're talking about cost, so definitely you have cost per GB. So data backup is having very high cost per GB, whereas data archival is very low cost per GB, because the storage solutions or the hardware solutions that both uses, whether it might be on-premise or cloud, are different. Okay, so that is the differentiator here. Is more of a hardware that is used in the behind the scenes, right? Or machines that are used behind the scenes, right? and this is used for speed and redundancy, and this is used for cost effective and scalability. Okay, because the scalability, the reason is it because it is cost effective, it can be easily scaled, and you're talking about terabytes and petabytes of data here. In case of data archival, backups are in terms of it cannot be in terabytes or petabytes. It usually be in certain in couple of GBs or near to some TBs, but data backup will be very less in terms of volumes. So here the concentration or the preferences for the speed and redundancy of the data. Here it is cost effective and scalability. And when you talk about compliance and security, so you would have already guessed it. So data archival comes into the picture when you're talking about compliance and security. So which is the main reason for archiving the data. So for sure, data archival gives you very high encryption and security, and also designed for industry regulations. So data backup is not actually designed for compliance or security. Okay, that doesn't mean it doesn't offer the security on the data. It does offer a high level of encryption and security, right? But it is not meant to kind of provide that level of security and encryption that data archival needs here, because we are talking here the very short duration, but when it comes to here, it is like decades, years to decades we are talking. So here it makes it 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 it's actually really required in terms of data archival, and it is kind of a very high requirement when it comes to data archival. Yeah. So next, let us see about data retrieval speed. So retrieval speed will be fast in terms of data backup. The reason is so it is needed for the disaster recovery. You need to have the data retrieved very fast, and here it will be slow because the speed is not a requirement here, and the retrieval may take like hours or days for that matter, and it is for the compliance and regulatory regulations. So that doesn't matter much. And here in terms of real-time systems, system integration, we are using it. So that is why you need the data very fast, accessible very fast. And here, because it is slow, like you need, and also we need to have a manual retrieval mechanism and specialized archival systems in place. And so each archival steps, there are certain tools and there's certain scripts that you can use to kind of retrieve the data manually, and or use some archival tools or systems that offers that. Okay. So with that, finally we'll move to the use cases. So in what use case you need to use which mechanism, right? So when it comes to data backup, let's take example. Our organization takes a daily backup of its financial data, which is stored in the database, to restore in case of any disaster recovery kind of scenario where data can get corrupt. Okay. And other case might be a user backs up their laptop to an external hard drive or a cloud service to recover files if lost. So this is a day-to-day use case. And the third one is a businessman maintains a backup of its customer transaction in case of cyber attacks. So he want to retain that data in a safe location. He want to back up that customer transactions, so he can use the data backup mechanism. When it comes to data archival, you can talk about hospital archiving patient's record. There might be hospital management systems which generates the data on daily basis, but the data needs to store in a long tenure of say 10 plus years to comply healthcare regulations of that particular country, right? And there might be a film studio, right? Archives a raw footage and the final edits for historical and legal purpose. So they wanted to keep it historically because they want to go back and refer that if those footages are needed for any other purpose any other a business purpose or financial purpose, and they want to keep the history of it. And also there might be some legal purpose to store that. Okay. And also, like there might be a legal firm stores case files and documentation of their customers for decades to comply with the legal retention laws and policies of any particular location or a country again. Yeah. So finally, if you talk about the conclusion part, so both data backup and data archivals are essential for a comprehensive data management strategies. Backup generally protects the data against immediate data loss and enables quick recovery. On the other hand, archival of the data ensures long-term data retention for compliance purpose and legal and historical needs. So business should implement basically both. So they based on the need basis, what is the specific needs and what is the cost implications and what is the speed it is expected and what are the regulatory requirements that they need to comply. So based on all these use cases, any organization can hang around between these two, right? So hope this concept of difference between data backup and data archival was useful. Thanks for watching.